With Labour support in Wales plummeting amidst policy reversals and rise in Plaid Cymru and Reform UK popularity, how can they regain public trust?
So the picture's changing here, according to the polls in Wales. Labour has dominated in Wales for pretty much a century. And what's happening here is reflecting the picture nationally, which is popularity, support for Labour is dropping, support for other parties is rising. In Wales, Reform and Plaid Cymru. How do you regain that trust that is clearly hemorrhaging from Labour at the moment?
It's really funny to me. Again, if you look at the abundance people over in America, those people who say just the Democrats should adopt literally every single median policy and you can just trust that your base will never leave you and they'll stay forever, just being permanently proven to be massively incorrect, this popularist strategy. Because the Labour Party's broad base of support supports the welfare state. And then the first thing they did when they got into government was slash the welfare state in multiple different areas. And then their base deserted them. And then they're sitting here looking at the mess of what used to be a Labour Party and going, well, what happened? How do we regain trust? And I'm just like, well, people trusted you to not do all the things that you're now doing, especially since both Keir Starmer and the Labour Party got elected on a fucking pack of lies. Maybe if you wanted to not have your trust lost with the electorate, you shouldn't just keep lying to people.
It's about delivering for the public, Fiona, whether that's here in Wales, John, whether that's here in every part of the United Kingdom. You know, when we came into power in Westminster just under a year ago, we said it wasn't going to be easy. You know, repairing 14 years of decimation to our public services all over the place was going to be difficult. But as the party of devolution, you know, I'm proud to be a Welsh Labour Member of Parliament, and as the party of devolution, having seen the biggest injection of funding to Wales from Westminster since devolution began, actually seeing the impact that that is having, whether that is the huge investment in our NHS here in Wales and across the UK, bringing down waiting lists, making sure that people who are waiting are suffering in pain, these are real people, not just numbers, are actually getting that service that they need, showing how having Labour governments at both ends of the M4 working in that partnership in power can deliver for everyone. Now,
and that's the thing, right, is that when it comes to Welsh Labour, they had this get-out-of-jail-free card for so long. They had this get-out-of-jail-free card of Westminster is the problem, and to a pretty large extent that was true. They can't play that card when Labour are in government, no matter how much nominal cash you put into the NHS and how much that goes to Wales. The breaking of trust, which is the whole point of the question, around what people expect a Labour government to do has fundamentally been broken by the cutting of the welfare budget.
When you talk about delivering, Labour has been in power here since time immemorial, pretty much. So you could have delivered, but it looks, according to the support you're getting, it looks like people don't trust you anymore. They don't believe in it.
And having to do that with a backdrop of really chronic underfunding of our services, whether that is our railway investment, our NHS, our public services. But look at what we are doing.
So it's all Westminster's fault?
No, it's not all Westminster's fault, but we do have to recognise that that is where the majority of our funding has come from. And what we have delivered in Wales, in spite of that funding, building new schools in Wales, delivering on free school meals in Wales, what we've announced in England today, we've already got here in Wales, free prescriptions in Wales. There is no tax on being ill. You know, it's ensuring that our public services are protected, ensuring that we've got that adequate schools investment. All of that is happening.
Talking about schools, you can't be proud.
I mean, it's a really interesting gambit for you to say, well, there's no tax on sickness in Wales. And I'm like, so you're getting rid of prescriptions in England? Weird for you to boast about the fact that prescription charges are a tax on the sickness and you got rid of them in Wales if you're now in government in Westminster and you're not doing it for England?
The record of schools here in Wales, ranking so low on the PISA rankings, which is the international ranking of schools. Wales is doing very poorly.
I'm proud that we're investing in our education in Wales, you know, building those new schools, those 21st century schools.
Are you proud of the educational record there?
I'm proud that
we are delivering where it is in the rankings?
And what we're doing is actually seeing that in practice, making sure that we've got that investment coming forward so that every child has the opportunity. I want children in my own constituency of Pontypridd and everywhere to ensure that they've got those opportunities.
Klinos.
Yeah, well, I think it's listening to you now. It's unfortunate that history, your promise of change hasn't happened for us in Wales. Labour promised change, and that we would benefit from both Labour in Cardiff and Labour in London. And
In all fairness, Welsh Labour try to sort of distance themselves from UK Labour. They still lack a spine, though. It's so funny to me, in that I think that part of the reason why Mark Drakeford stepped down is because there was such a big rift between the vision that he had for what Labour could be and what it became under Starmer. And I think Mark Drakeford probably secretly knew that the curtains were really falling on Labour's government in Wales as soon as Starmer's project was known to voters, right? So I think he really kind of scarpered quickly when he knew what was coming. If we had a Drakeford still as First Minister in Wales right now, would Labour be as collapsing as hard as they are currently? I don't think so. I don't think so. Like, they wouldn't have had the Vaughan Gethin stuff, that someone who was just awful, terrible, no one liked him. And there is, even under Eluned Morgan, there is still some level of unity between the Welsh Labour and the Starmer project. If you had a Drakeford in Wales who was standing up against what's happening from Starmer, at least to a greater extent than Morgan is, then maybe Labour would be keeping some of their support here. But that's not the case. That's not the case. And this is why I think we're not just seeing reform make gains in Wales in post-industrial areas that haven't got some kind of strategic reinvestment from the new government in Westminster, but people who just are born and bred Labour voters who feel like it doesn't represent their interests on how the economy should be shaped are moving over to a progressive party in the form of Plaid Cymru, despite not agreeing with Welsh independence.
It hasn't happened. Recently, have you heard this week, Cambridge and Oxford is now in Wales. There's this rail infrastructure in Cambridge and it's a Welsh and England project. HS2, the funding to Wales. In 2022, the Secretary of State for Wales, Jo Stevens, agreed with Plaid Cymru. It was 4.6 billion we owed in Wales. She becomes now the Welsh, our Secretary of State, and she can't stand up for us.
Can we just understand that a minute? Because I don't understand that.
Yeah.
So and I know you'll all be aware of this.
Yeah.
So the Oxford-Cambridge transport link that's going to be put in comes under English and Welsh funding. What's it got to do with Wales?
Yes, so it comes out of the same reserved pot of money that upgrades to, for example, Cardiff train station is classed as an England and Wales project. So that is where it is. This is a reserved sort of pot of money that comes to both England and Wales from the Westminster government. But what we have seen, and that is a fact in terms of how that funding model works, but what we have seen is Jo Stevens actually recognising the chronic underfunding that our railways in Wales have had. And we've got the spending.
I mean, I think you're right, Surat, a lot, that it's probably disingenuous to say that, oh, well, they're spending Welsh money on English projects. No, well, the money is hypothecated to a pool that both Welsh and English infrastructure projects can access, right? But I think that, regardless, there is a broader point to make, and I've made it a lot on this channel, which is that their opening gambit in the budget from Rachel Reeves and the Labour Party in Westminster was, we're putting all of this seed capital to rebuild the Cambridge-Oxford link. We are creating a Silicon Valley between Oxford and Cambridge. And I'm just like, what the hell do you think you're playing at? They're not the places starved of investment. The places starved of investment are Labour heartlands that have been abandoned for 46 years. It's obviously Wales, as we pointed out there. It's places in the north, in the West Midlands, right? Those are the places in Lincolnshire where Labour should be looking to level up, like Boris Johnson always promised but never delivered. And when they're looking at reform and, of course, Plaid Cymru and other regional parties making gains in these Labour heartland areas, they're looking and going, well, how do we lose these people? Well, because you stood up in front of the country and said, we're going to direct more seed capital, more public investment into the areas that have all got public investment at a time when it's been completely cut off from all of these post-industrial communities for all of these years, right? You were put into government to fix, in the voters' minds, this glaring regional inequality, and your opening gambit was Cambridge and Oxford. So the hypothecated fund for England and Wales, right, I'm not going to quibble with this, but it's so tone-deaf and such a poor decision in terms of the justified levelling up funding that is missing. That remains to be just as pertinent, because at the end of the day, where you decide to put your investment money shows you where your priorities are. And if you're a Labour government and your priority isn't Sunderland, it isn't Accrington, it isn't, places in Western Wales, for example, then you've failed at what is your job, which is to redirect money that has been allocated by the market into prosperous areas to those that have missed out, to ensure that we have regional equality. And the fact that they're only starting on looking at direct investment into the north, especially, for example, 10 months into government, in the third fiscal event, I guess, shows you that they really haven't got a clue.
Review next week. I think we need to not get ahead of ourselves to see what could be coming.
Let Lee Cleanos continue.
And to continue, our resources in Wales, the Crown Estate, something that's devolved to Scotland. Scotland get the profits from their Crown Estate, from their natural resources. I put forward an amendment in Westminster. No Welsh Labour MP came through that voting lobby with me to get what's rightly ours to put back into our communities. And on top of that, these decisions around the winter fuel payments, PIP. The PIP will impact Wales dramatically. We are a poorer nation. And thank you for asking the question around education. I was a council leader for 7 years. I looked at the budget and the struggle to keep education at where it was. And there was lack of recognition that we weren't investing in our young people, that we weren't giving them the opportunities. I want Welsh children to achieve across the world. And for them to be able to achieve, we need to invest in them, invest in it. Not saying, oh, we've given them a good building, but we can't give them the best in the classroom. Okay. That's where it should be.
I mean, this is what we need to hammer them on every single time, right? Hammer them on. It's true. Like, it is an absolute scandal. It is a damning indictment of this Labour Party. The fact that the winter fuel U-turn was so easily won by public pressure, and yet they're convinced they still have to make these depraved PIP cuts. And again, no one who is a lifelong Labour voter voted Labour to take money away from the disabled. They just didn't. Working people, trade unionists, people who've made up the Labour base since its inception, understand that disability can happen to anyone at any time, at any stage of their career, and the welfare state is there to look after you if things go awry. And we should not be picking and choosing who we believe to be the justified recipients of disability help. Otherwise, that leads to bad places. Trade unionists, workers, they know this, and to see Labour doing it is a breach of that trust.
So Labour possibly feels that it's got its Welsh votes in the bag regardless in Westminster, and the Tories possibly feel that they're not going to win a plurality or a majority of votes in Wales anyway. So possibly is it time to look at a third party like Plaid Cymru in Wales?
Well, let's just, I mean, polling can change, but the latest polling, voting intention for voting in the Senate, and those big elections are going to be next year, put Plaid Cymru first, followed by Reform, then Labour, Conservatives behind them as well. It's a big change at the moment. Let's see if that continues. That's just one poll. Woman here in the red top.
Education is definitely not being improved in Wales. As a mother and a governor at my son's school and friends with school teachers, the only things that we're facing at the moment is bigger classes and redundancies. What is being done by Labour to tackle that? And
where, I mean, it's a year away, but where would you see, if you don't mind me asking, your vote going next year? Not Labour by the sounds of it.
Well, no. To be honest, I was going to vote Labour, but I happened to be away in the election and didn't do my postal vote in time. And you know what? I'm glad.
OK. Let's hear the woman in front in the green top.
I'm a lifelong Labour supporter, and they're definitely losing my support with a lot of the policies that they're bringing in at the moment.
Do you mean nationally?
Nationally, yeah, but specifically the DWP taking, reducing the benefits to people with disabilities. And I've heard a lot about how it's supposedly going to get disabled people back into work. I'm a parent of 2 disabled adults who have spent their life trying to get into work, never mind back into work. And I'm absolutely disgusted by Labour's policy against them. And
again, PIP is not something with a work requirement. PIP is there to help disabled people both in and out of work. If you take PIP away from the disabled people who are in work, it makes them less likely to stay in work. It makes it harder for them who's out of work to get back into work. It is a monstrous policy. It is a totally monstrous policy. And that's exactly what I said. It's exactly what I said at the top of the programme. Lifelong Labour voters do not vote Labour to see cuts to welfare. They just don't.
Information about the schemes that are supposed to be in place to support people to get back into work or into work in the first place.
Man here in the cap.
I voted Labour on the last election. I voted for change. What I'm seeing now is more of the same. I'm not seeing any commitments that seem to be policy-driven. It seems to be totally transactional. I think that's a word that's used overseas quite a bit. But there doesn't seem to be a plan. I don't see anything going forward that makes me think Sir Keir Starmer has got the ship going forward.
Literally couldn't have said it better myself, Mr. Che Guevara t-shirt guy. I knew he'd have a base take on this one, but it's true. It is transactional. It's Morgan McSweeney turning the dial, trying to triangulate where they think that the median voter of the electorate is, rather than trying to create a coalition of people who share an ideology, because the people in charge have no beliefs. They have no vision. They don't believe in anything. They want power for power's sake. He's so correct at calling it transactional. So correct. So perceptive. Right? It's because they're Welsh. It's just the fact that the regional voters in this country are just so much more switched on than the English ones. Labour seems so happy to give supporters like these nothing whilst chasing the ethereal reform voters. I know, it's pathetic, isn't it? It just shows you why Keir Starmer should never have been the leader of the Labour Party. He should never have been leader. He is somebody who is actively trying to get these people out of the Labour fold. Remember, guys, the door is open and you can leave.
So, to be clear, the years of Tory government were desperate for most people in this country. They crashed the economy. We saw rising poverty, wage stagnation, no more building of council houses, chronic problems in this country. And Labour won the election by a landslide in seats, although not in terms of proportion of the vote. And to say that this Labour government has been the most desperate disappointment and is letting it down its core communities in Wales and the UK is an understatement of the year.
True.
Why I think this is so serious is because I remember when Tony Blair won the election. And when we were unhappy that Tony Blair was moving into the centre, we could see that the Labour strategists took the view that our core vote has nowhere else to go and we can move as right-wing as we want. But now they're seeing that people do think they can go somewhere else, and tragically that is to reform. Now, I have no doubt...
I mean, this isn't true. This is just not true. Every single poll that covers not just ones specifically on Labour defectors, but you look at the crosstabs from polling across the country, this is not true. Most Labour voters are going to the Liberal Democrats, to the Green Party, to the Scottish National Party, and to Plaid Cymru, if you're looking at the regions, right? It's a very small proportion. It's about 11%, so it's not nobody, but it's a smaller proportion that are going to reform rather than going to parties that are perceived to be the left of Labour. Reform are getting most of their support from non-voters. So Mark is just kind of wrong. He's just wrong here. But again, it's a convenient narrative that it takes a look at the data to be able to unwind.
A reform government would be desperately divisive and dangerous in this country. These are clever politicians. Richard Tice, the deputy leader, is reportedly worth 40 million. I don't believe he cares about people on welfare, on benefits, or workers in Port Talbot Steelworks. But they say they are, and people are so disillusioned with the centre ground of politics, reform are surging in the polls. And apart from the fact that the Tories have collapsed, I think there is another central reason. And it is because of Labour's abandonment of its core principles and working class communities. And let me use this as an example. Allegedly, Labour found a £20 billion black hole. I don't believe that for a minute. In the election, the IFS made it clear every single day the main parties were ducking the issue of the problems this country faced. But if you believe them, they find a £20 billion black hole. They had a decision to make on that day they found it. And the answer that they gave to that problem revealed everything you need to know. To fill the £20 billion black hole, they could have had a wealth tax. They could have put up corporation tax. They could have chased those who had the most.
but they attacked pensioners, they attack disabled people, and they attack parents who have more than 2 children who are on benefits. And if your solution to our problems is to attack the most vulnerable, the poorest, the disabled, rather than those who can afford to pay, it tells you the direction of travel. And here's the thing. When people lobbied Rachel Reeves about the winter funeral payment, she was not for turning. When she was lobbied on the 2-child benefit policy, she was not for turning. But when she was lobbied by the non-DOMs, the rich people avoiding paying the tax, what did she say? They make a strong argument, and I've changed my mind. Why do the rich people convince Rachel Reeves, but the poor and the vulnerable and the people who are suffering never get it?
Mark, let me ask.
Absolute banger. Did not want to stop him. Did not want to stop him for a moment there. Or Lord Ali lobbying Keir Starmer to block Angela Rayner's suggestion of blocking foreign mega donors from influencing UK elections, right? That was something he lobbied for specifically. He's so right. It's worth pointing out, by the way, where there was a £22 billion black hole. This is true. Half of this was the public sector pay awards that were independently set, that the Tories ducked and left to Labour to clean up the mess for. It's not necessarily an overspend, but it's something they didn't budget for, even though they knew they had to do it. When it comes to the other 11 billion, these were departmental overspends, right? When Mark Sobotka there referred to the IFS saying that they weren't being truthful about the state of the nation's finances, this is true. Because on top of all of those public sector pay awards, on top of all of that departmental overspend, there was also £20 billion coming in real terms cuts to unprotected governmental department budgets. Stephen Flynn was referring to in all of those election debates, right? In that if taxes were not raised, unprotected government departments would see real terms cuts to the tune of around about £20 billion. So this is why the few taxes that were raised, so 6% on capital gains tax and the 1.2% on business national insurance, raised a total of 40 billion. That was to do the public sector pay awards, to clean up the departmental overspends, and to make sure there weren't real terms cuts in some unprotected departments, right? So they didn't actually refund anything. They did clean up a mess that was left for them. But of course, on top of this, as Mark correctly points out, they did attack the disabled. They did attack pensioners. For example, even think about removing the 2-child benefit cap. And in fact, they got rid of 7 of their own MPs voting to remove it. Again, as Mark points out, that shows you the direction of travel.
So the people here in this audience will have a decision to make next year, which is how they're going to vote in the Senate. You clearly have been a Labour supporter, I imagine, for all your life. After what you've just said, would you recommend here to people that they vote Labour next year?
No. What I would say is that there is a crisis in our politics at the moment. We have a PR system. The threat of reform is huge. But I could not knock on a door and tell people to vote to take money off pensioners, attack the disabled, and to turn their back on their core constituencies.
Okay.
So my appeal, and I make this genuinely, is because of the crisis in politics, and ask yourself this question: does anyone believe the politicians of today, back in 1946, 1947, would have founded the NHS? They are not up to it. They'd have said, we can't afford it, it's too idealistic. The politicians of today need to grasp radical solutions, privatise the water companies, invest in our communities.
I presume you mean nationalise.
I mean nationalise, sorry, the water companies. And to say to councils and NHS trusts who are sacking workers at the moment to pay their debts, we will not ask you to cut back on public services. We will write off your debts in the way we've done to the banks 12 years after the financial crash. One rule for the rich, one rule for everyone.
Let me bring in the rest of the panel.
And he is right. He is right. You shouldn't be voting Labour, given the positions that they have taken. If you want progressive change, if you want something that actually is there to challenge power, if you want to join a political party that wants to tax the richest in this country to be able to make this a fairer and more equal society, you've got to join the Green Party and Greens Organise, and then you got to join and back Zach. By joining the Green Party before the 30th of June, then you can be eligible to vote in the Green Party leadership election. Zach Polanski is standing on a radical platform of change. Real change, unlike the fake change from Labour.
Labour, I mean, more people in this audience will have voted Labour than for any other single party, but we've even got Labour voters giving Labour a kicking tonight. Not necessarily all of you, but certainly the ones that I have randomly picked out. Dan, I'm sure you will want to join in, but let's just point out the Conservatives lost all 12 of their Welsh Westminster seats in the 2024 election. And you, at the moment, it can change, it's just one poll, but you are polling beneath Plaid, Reform and Labour.
We had a challenging result last July. But the question, of course, that was asked was about why Labour support...
Sort of smattering of sort of laughter.
Why Labour support has actually plummeted. And
It's so funny how the Tories come on and they get laughed at every week. It's over. It's done. There's no Conservative Party. There is no Conservative base. You're hated. Go away. Stop it.
the reason that Labour support has plummeted is because we've had a failing Labour government propped up by Plaid Cymru and propped up by the Liberal Democrats for 26 years in Wales, and they have delivered the worst NHS waiting lists in the United Kingdom, the lowest wages in the United Kingdom, and the poorest educational outcomes. That is their record, and unfortunately, they are now beginning to see that the chickens are coming home to roost.
Like, how on earth is a devolved government supposed to increase wages? What? Are they able to, like, run macro policy? They don't have access to monetary levers, you know. They can't institute collective bargaining specifically within the borders of Wales under devolution. That's not the powers that they have. The shitty wages are the fact that they've been stagnant across the country because of Conservative policy, especially Conservative policy that did not invest supply-side investment money into the critical industries in Wales. Now, you can blame Labour for not doing enough of that themselves. I blame them myself, right? Happy to blame Labour for that too. But that's not a devolved power. That's Labour and Westminster that's failing that. The government in Wales have had their hands tied by their devolution deal for a very, very long time. And the Tories were the ones who had shit macro policy, shit industrial policy, who left industrial communities in Wales and across England and Scotland to rot. And so for him to come in and say, oh, well, you can't talk about Conservative Party, you have to talk about the Labour Party devolved government, when the Tories were the ones running the shitty policy that created all of those problems in the first place that people like Mark Drakeford were desperately trying to clean up the mess from in government, in the Senedd. It takes a brass neck. It takes a real brass neck, given how many people the Conservative Party killed when they were in government in Westminster, to come down and try and blame Mark Drakeford, of all people, for why there are shitty wages and poor investment in Wales.
See this as an opportunity because, of course, there is a place for a different path that will bring lower taxes, more efficient public services, get to grips with the challenges that we have in our health service by declaring a health emergency and delivering the improvements that everybody wants to see. And, of course, compounding the problem here in Wales for Labour is not just their legacy after 26 years, but it's the fact that since July of last year, we've seen inflation go up, borrowing go up, taxes go up, and everybody's getting less and less in return. That is not a record that people should be proud of, and that's why I think you'll see a big change in those polls over the next 12 months, particularly when people realise that here in Wales, it's not just Labour to blame for these failures, but it's also Plaid Cymru and the Liberal Democrats too.
I mean, Plaid Cymru, as you say in chat, left their cooperation agreement when Starmer did all his shit policy. You know, they've been having a minority government since. Plaid Cymru were happy to stand up to the failure of the Conservative government in Westminster when it was in Wales's interests, but they did not want to cooperate with Starmer's government. So he's really being disingenuous here. But then again, he's a Tory, they always are.
Annabelle.
Well, Alex talked about delivery, and I'm just going to add a few things to Darren's list here. GDP per capita in Wales is now over £1,000 lower than it was before the pandemic. Productivity in Wales is the lowest of any region in the UK. It has an employment rate 6 percentage points below the UK average. And it isn't just that, it's the money that has been wasted on the pet schemes of some of Welsh Labour's politicians. 20-mile-an-hour speed limits,
Absolutely.
a universal...
I'm sorry, like, the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit is shown to be successful at, like, creating a safer environment. Again, just endless endless levels of inane bullshit that right-wingers tie themselves in knots just to avoid the fact that it's right-wing macro policy in the background that's the fault of all of these things, right? If you have regional inequality under a broadly neoliberalized market system and you don't have a powerful way to both redistribute the funds from the prosperous ones to the unprosperous areas, and you don't have an industrial policy that reinvests to reinvigorate the local economy, which again is only really the purview of the large budgets that the Westminster government has, there is no way of repairing this problem. There are low wages, there is high unemployment in Wales because fucking endless Conservative governments, and the Blair administration, to be fair, was also neoliberal in this way, did not have industrial policy. They left Wales to rot. They left Wales with no industry, with no state funding to be able to protect the industries that kept people in work. It was the Tory government in Westminster that oversaw year after year after year, knowing that Port Talbot would collapse, and they did fuck all apart from give Tata Steel one huge bung to then screw them over anyway. Right? That's Conservative failure. That is neoliberalism's failure. And Labour's failure is that they're continuing that failure. The chief blame has to lie with the Conservative government in Westminster for all of those years that refused to invest. Because that's what you need the central bank powers to be able to do, is because investment comes from bond issuance and fiscal expansion. A small devolved budget is not big enough for the large-scale industrial policy necessary to bring jobs back to Wales. To go what 20-mile-an-hour speed limits as if that is the cause of unemployment in Wales is fucking ridiculous. But of course Annabel Denham is a neoliberal. She cannot admit that it is her ideology that's to blame.
So basic income. Adding 35 members to the Senedd, and there have been 36 members to the Senedd, and there have been damaging policies.
Imagine coming onto a panel about Welsh politics as an English person and not even bothering to look up how Senedd is pronounced.
Including clobbering holiday homeowners, for instance. So it's become this...
Literally, what's her patient zero for the failure of the Welsh economy? Oh, they've put a tax on holiday homes, something that has been shown across the country to reduce house prices for struggling working people in the areas that are being pushed out by rich second homeowners. Shows you who people at the Telegraph are fighting for.
Laboratory for some of the worst policies which have been foisted on the British public ever. But of course the general sense of disillusionment is not unique to Wales, even though it maybe felt more acutely here. So back to Alex's point on delivery, what has Labour given us? Well, it promised that it would look after farmers, and then it's imposed inheritance tax on farmland.
It's not imposed inheritance tax. They halved the 100% inheritance tax loophole that farmers had that no one else has. They haven't even made farmers equal with everybody else. They still get half the rate of inheritance tax that any other fucker in this country gets. To try and imply that farmers are hard done by because they have to pay even less than everyone else does, just a slightly bit more than they used to, ridiculous.
It promised that it wouldn't raise taxes on working people, only to increase employer national insurance contributions by...
But employers aren't working people.
£25 billion in the October budget, which Rachel Reeves herself has previously described as a jobs tax. There's been the fiasco with the winter fuel payment. Keir Starmer promised to smash the gangs, and yet we've had a record number of illegal migrants coming across the channel.
And again, just yet more deflection from her failed neoliberal dogma, which has failed Wales for decades.
In 2025. Now, the only thing I would say as a caveat to all of this is that many voters in response will feel as though perhaps reform is the panacea, to which I would say they have an awful lot of work to do to convince me. They need to professionalise, they need a policy unit, they need managers. They've got a mountain to climb. And ditto with Plaid Cymru. I still haven't had a satisfactory answer to how it is that they can, in good conscience, be in favour of independence when they haven't answered how they would address the social and welfare bill.
OK, let me come around a bit more about audience. So, where have we got here? There's two men at the back with their hands up. Let's hear from the one in the... I think you've got a blue card or jacket on or something. Yes.
To the point that seemed to have got missed from the panel was from Llynnos when she mentioned the offshore wind resources, the wind farms we've got just outside of the studio where we are here, and the massive amount of natural resources that we have in Wales that Wales has very little benefit from. If our NHS and education system is in such dire straits due to funding, why cannot we be allowed to use our own natural resources instead of pumping it across the border into England in one way or another?
Okay, and the man next to you?
So I think all of the political parties represented here are missing something, and I think Reform is too. I think, yes, social care, education, these are really, really important things. But we're talking about lowering taxes at the same time and keeping taxes the same at the same time. I think a healthy, vibrant economy is what supports education. A healthy and vibrant economy is what supports all of those other things that we really care about. So I don't understand why there is this propensity to want to reduce tax. A healthy society needs to tax its individuals, and especially those at 40, 50% tax rates, could easily put 1% on that rate. And I believe that is the answer. Not tax cutting, not cuts, but actually spending. I believe that's the answer.
True. It's exactly what I said on Novara the other day. Not only is it good to increase the level to which that people have buy-in with society, it is a representation of the social contract. It makes people think it's good that I pay tax, it's good that I contribute, it's good that we are all part of this national project together to be able to create a better society for everyone, who else who contributes or who is unable to contribute. Of course, the richest should pay the most, and we should absolutely be looking at wealth taxes, increasing capital gains tax, land taxes, private jet taxes, exit taxes, the whole gamut, you name it, I'm in favour. But of course, I do think that personal tax can be increased too, as people are trying to foment this world where tax is something that only other people pay, which I think is incorrect. So.
Alex, let me come back to you, because there has been a lot of criticism coming Labour's way, and I need to give you a chance to respond to that. I mean, for example, the point that you made about disability benefits and the cut to personal independence payments.
Yeah. Look, we never said it was going to be easy when we came in having to look at how we funded public services that have been chronically underfunded for 14 years. It's looking at making those difficult decisions to rebalance the books, make sure that our spending was sustainable and was fit for purpose. It's looking at how we can actually make sure that those with the broadest shoulders do pay the highest burdens by going after the non-doms, which we did do, taxing private jets, going after...
But you, at the very least, watered down those non-dom regulations, and they bring in pittance, they bring in pennies. It's a very, very small amount of taxation. Likewise with the private school VAT. Again, not a policy I disagree with, but the scale is so tiny. It's so tiny in a £1 trillion budget. Wealth taxes and capital gains tax increases going further would raise plenty more, plenty more.
After the energy companies, but also looking at how we make sure that we have public services fit for the future. It's about boosting our economy. You mentioned looking at economy and our offshore wind programmes. If we had devolved the Crown Estate, focused on constitutional issues, which Plaid Cymru want us to focus on, rather than actually getting on with the job of ensuring we've got renewable energy,
those constitutional issues are economic in nature. It's ridiculous that so much of it is the Crown lands. Ridiculous. That revenue should be going back into the Welsh devolved government to spend on public services. That's the whole point that Plaid Cymru are making. It's not a constitutional issue. It's an economic issue, but you have to engage in constitutional change to be able to foment that policy. Really weird deflection there. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.